Thanks to Assiniboine Credit Union for hosting us here in their lovely new office this morning to talk about the living wage. ACU has been a sponsor of the Living Wage Project for many years, and we're glad to have them alongside and speaking with us this morning. So I'm the host, I'm Niall Harney. I'm a senior researcher at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. I'm going to be introducing our speakers this morning. We're going to hear first from Natalie and Jesse, who are both from the University of Manitoba and who put together our calculations for the living wage this year. After that, we're going to hear from three speakers. We're going to hear from Daniel Wasik from Persons Community Solutions about their work as a living wage employer and their experience as a living wage employer. Then we're going to hear from Gord Delbridge from QP 500 about their advocacy on living wages at the City of Winnipeg. And then finally, we're going to hear from Brendan Reimer from ACU about their experience as a living wage employer here in Winnipeg. So for anyone who's been buying groceries in the last year, it's going to be no surprise that this year's living wage is increasing. But we've seen a really strong impact from government programs, particularly the introduction of $10 a day childcare in the province. And so I think, as we think about the holiday season and we grapple with some of the inequities in our community, we are hearing stories of growing food bank use across the city, and Winnipeg Harvest Manitoba put out their report last week noting that 40% of their clients are using food banks, 40% of their clients who are using the food bank are working, and that's a 66% increase from last year. So we're seeing growing levels of working poverty in our community, and I think we have to recognize what are the root causes of that poverty. It's because living wages are too low and wages need to be brought up to a living wage. So we're calling on the province of Manitoba to increase the minimum wage to a living wage and to adopt an annual formula for increasing that minimum wage in line with the living wage. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jesse and Natalie to show us the numbers for this year.
Thank you, Niall. I'd like to acknowledge funding from the Manitoba Research Alliance and the Social Science and Humanities Research Council that supported Natalie's participation in this project. So I'm going to run through the key findings from this year's living wage update. The first finding, as Niall noted, is that inflation has hit Manitobans in their pocketbooks, and that has led to an increase in the cost of living and therefore an increase in the living wage. We also have seen, however, that the $10 a day childcare program implemented by the federal government in partnership with the province has also had a huge impact. It didn't fully offset the rise in the cost of living, but it actually had quite a large impact and offset most of the increase in costs. When we look at changes at the provincial level, specifically the use of tax cuts to address affordability, we see in our analysis that those tax cuts have actually had basically no effect on the change in the bottom line of families who are working at the income level of the living wage. And fourth, we see that provincial benefits, such as rent assist and the child care subsidy, phase out at much too low an income level to matter for most of our living wage families. We only have one out of our 6 family types that we have seen, that we looked at, who actually qualify for rent assist and the child care subsidy. Everyone else has to earn an income that is too high to qualify for these programs. And finally, we can see that the Manitoba living wage is clearly above the current minimum wage, so that if we want our minimum wage in Manitoba to be a living wage, that needs to be increased significantly. Now, what is a living wage? A living wage assumes that we have a 2-parent, 2-child family. Both parents are working full-time at 35 hours a week. And what we do when we calculate the living wage is that we look at how much income has to be earned after we take into account taxes, transfers, and payroll reductions that the family has to pay, as well as other benefit programs that are available to the family that are universal in nature so that everyone can access. If we look at a sample family for the living wage in Winnipeg, we can see that the living wage is $19.21 per hour, or this is an income of $35,000 a year approximately for each working parent working full-time. And this is what a family of four could afford with that living wage. Approximately $1,000 goes towards food each month. $173 goes towards clothing and footwear. Shelter expense, by far the largest expense in the budget of the family, is $1,800 approximately, and that covers rent, utilities, and contents insurance. Transportation, around $600 a month. Childcare now, around $400 a month. We also include private health insurance, parents' education for one parent to take one course per semester to advance themselves in the labor market, as well as a contingency fund equal to about 2 weeks of wages. And then finally, all other household expenses, including things like communications, cell phones, household supplies, etc., adds up to just over $1,000 a month. So that gives you an idea of a budget for our living wage family. There are many things that could be considered essential that many families face as costs that aren't included in the living wage. So for example, credit card payments, interest on credit cards, loans, and other debt or interest payments, there's no budget for that. No savings for retirement. No ability to save up to own a home. Also, anything beyond minimal recreation or entertainment costs are not included. There's no vacations happening here. Also, the cost of caring for a disabled or seriously ill or elderly family member, not included. And there is only a minimal cushion for emergencies. So I'll hand it over to Natalie now to take us through the changes that we've seen compared to last year's living wage.
Thank you, Jesse.
So sorry this keeps going.
So the living wage for the two-parent, two-child family in Winnipeg was $19.21 an hour. That's up 5% from last year. The main drivers for this increase have been the cost of food, shelter, transportation, and other necessities, as you can see here. However, this was significantly mitigated by the fall in the cost of childcare, which, as you can see, fell by 35%. The increase in the wage that was required to cover these additional costs also resulted in a fall in government transfers, which is what led to the overall increase of 5% in the living wage from last year. In Brandon, the living wage was found to be $15.69 an hour for 2023. This is lower than the Winnipeg living wage, primarily due to the price of rent in Brandon, which is much lower. Rent only increased by 2% from last year, as opposed to 5% in Winnipeg. Since rent is such a large proportion of this family's expenses, rent cost has a large impact on the living wage. Otherwise, the story is pretty much the same in Brandon. The cost of groceries, transportation, other necessities drove up the cost of the living wage, but the cost of childcare falling significantly offset that. In Thompson, the living wage was $17.48 an hour for 2023, and that is up 5% from last year. Again, the cost of food, transportation, and other expenses went up significantly, but thanks to a fall in the cost of childcare, this was offset, netting out to only a 2% increase in the cost of expenses for the family. Living wages for single parents, for Winnipeg, it was found to be $25.46, an 18-cent increase from last year. Brandon's was $13.53, a 65-cent decrease. And in Thompson, it increased significantly, $4.44, to $25.35 an hour. And that was primarily due to the large increase in the cost of rent for the family.
All right, so just to recap again, our key findings in this report. We have inflation playing a big role here, driving up the cost of living for all families. What we do see is childcare costs offsetting that increase. It's important to remember there is a constrained supply of childcare in Manitoba. So this assumes that families can get a regulated nonprofit childcare space at the going rate, which is supported through the federal program. So it's important to remember that for this living wage to be meaningful, it requires someone to have access to that childcare program. Again, the tax cuts made a minimal difference. We're talking about $40 a year in the 2022 tax year. And we know that those tax cuts are actually much higher for higher income families. So there's a public policy issue to consider that's really important. As we can see with our single parent families, if your expenses are low enough, as in the case of Brandon, our families can access programs like rent assist and the childcare subsidy, and the living wage becomes a reasonable, achievable goal. Where in cities like Winnipeg and Thompson, the living wage of $25 has a lot to do with families not being able to qualify for these public policy programs that support the cost of living for working people. A shift in money towards tax cuts, towards programs like rent assist and childcare subsidies to make those phase out later would be a difference that would really help our living wage families. And then finally, again, the living wage should be the minimum wage, but that is not the case in Manitoba. I think we can all agree if someone is working full-time, they should not be living in poverty. But the case in Manitoba currently is our minimum wage is a poverty level wage. Thank you for your time. We're happy to take any questions.
I'll invite Daniel up, and then after we hear from our three speakers, we'll have another opportunity for questions. Daniel.
I'm just going to fix the microphone.
Yes.
Because it's, people are mic'd into here, so it needs to go. The man who travels with the tool.
Good morning, everyone.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Daniel Wasik. I work at Persons Community Solutions. We're one of the steward partners for the Community Safety Host Initiative, which is a living wage program. Usually go off the cuff, but I think today is a day where I need to say things very specifically so that it is heard. So, what I wanted to say today is that in Manitoba, the necessity for many to work multiple jobs because of inadequate wages undermines our community's stability, since people cannot meet their essential needs. Implementing a living wage is a feasible step that benefits not just workers, but businesses too, fostering a healthier, more resilient community. This shift from a narrow profit focus to a holistic well-being approach can strengthen the very foundation of our society. When discussing our company's commitment to exceeding a living wage, I often encounter skepticism, yet this approach is more attainable than many think. For instance, the Community Safety Host Initiative has committed to exceeding a living wage since its inception. This initiative, compared to traditional security services, showcases how transparency in financial practices can justify a living wage. Unlike many security firms that often obscure their wage structures, our openness about where our expenses go, including wages, give the client a clearer understanding of where their money is going. Another key factor in making the living wage feasible is the groundwork laid by organizations like the CCPA. Their clear, evidence-based approach to determining a living wage provides a reliable benchmark. This takes away much of the guesswork for employers, allowing us to focus on implementation rather than justification. By embracing transparency and relying on established living wage figures, we demonstrate that paying fair wages is not just morally right, but also economically sensible. It leads to more stable employment, better job performance, and a more engaged community. It's about moving forward with a sustainable business model that values every worker. Paying a living wage in Manitoba isn't just a theoretical idea, it's practical and achievable. It's about changing the narrative from it's too difficult to it's essential for a thriving community. Our initiative is a testament to this possibility, serving as an example for other sectors to follow.
Thanks, Daniel. And now I'll ask Gord Delbridge to join us up front.
Thank you. First off, I just want to mention my name is Gord Delbridge, president of KP Local 500. And I want to thank the CCPA for the work that they've done here on this report. It's a very important report, especially at this time. You know, many workers are accessing food banks at levels like we've never seen before. Many of these workers, so happen to be City of Winnipeg employees and people that are providing city services to the citizens of Winnipeg. We need to see employers lead by example, and employers such as the City of Winnipeg that are paying poverty wages and not paying living wages need to step up to the plate. So we're calling on the province of Manitoba to increase the minimum wage to a living wage. We're calling upon the City of Winnipeg to pay a living wage as well. Let's start treating people with dignity and respect, and let's build the Winnipeg and Manitoba that we all want. Thank you.
Thanks, Gord. And now, Brendan Reimer.
Hi there, I'm Brendan Reimer with Assiniboine Credit Union. Assiniboine Credit Union is a financial cooperative locally owned by the 140,000 Manitobans that use the services and get advice here from over 500 employees. Our mission is our purpose, and that is to provide financial services for the well-being and resilience of our members, our employees, our communities, and the environment. One important way that we ensure the financial health of employees is by paying a living wage to help make ends meet at home, and by expanding our living wage commitments and requirements to our vendors, the companies who do work for ACU, like clean our buildings. Manitobans working for ACU will be compensated for their work at no less than the levels that the CCPA has determined are required to meet their basic needs. This is how we create good jobs in our communities and support the financial health of those who work for ACU and strengthen our local economy. Paying a living wage to employees is the right thing to do, but it's also a smart business approach. It enhances employee attraction and retention, engagement and productivity, in part because it reduces the financial stress that many people experience. Assiniboine Credit Union is grateful for the role that the CCPA plays in strengthening our local economy by supporting the working conditions for Manitobans. We will be making the necessary adjustments to our compensation levels at ACU and with our vendors. And we would like to invite all employers in Manitoba to join with ACU in making living wage commitments as well for the well-being of working Manitobans. ACU is proud to be a living wage employer as we work toward building a sustainable future for all. Thank you.